The gymnasium smelled of old wood and sweat, a scent that hadn't changed in 40 years. Martin Hayes stood at the entrance, his weathered hands gripping the doorframe as fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Inside, a dozen teenagers moved through basketball drills with the kind of careless grace that only youth affords. Their sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. Their laughter echoed off the cinder-block walls. He shouldn't have been there, not at 63, not after everything. One boy stood apart from the others, skinny, withdrawn, his shoulders hunched as if carrying weight no 16-year-old should know. Marcus. The kid reminded Martin of someone he'd tried to forget for decades. The boy missed an easy layup, and the others groaned. Marcus's face flushed red, and he turned away, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Martin felt something crack open inside his chest, something he'd kept sealed since 1952. The coach blew his whistle, and the sound pierced through time itself. Martin's vision blurred. For a moment, he wasn't 63 anymore. He was 14, standing in this same gymnasium, being told he wasn't good enough, being told to quit, being told his dreams were too big for a kid from the South Side. His hand trembled against the doorframe. "Can I help you?" A voice snapped him back. Martin looked at the young coach, barely 30, clipboard in hand, impatience written across his face. Martin's voice caught. "I used to play here, long time ago." The coach nodded politely, already turning away. Just another old man lost in yesterday, but Martin didn't move. He watched Marcus sink onto the bench, defeated, invisible. And in that moment, Martin Hayes understood something that would change the rest of his life. His best years weren't behind him. They were about to begin. This is the story of a man who believed his purpose had expired with his youth. Martin Hayes had spent 4 decades convincing himself that meaning belonged to the young, the capable, the relevant. At 63, he was none of those things, or so he thought. Martin Hayes was a retired postal worker from Chicago's South Side. He lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on Ashland Avenue, the same building where he'd raised his daughter after his wife passed in 1971. His days followed a predictable rhythm: coffee at dawn, crossword puzzles, afternoon walks, television until sleep claimed him. He was invisible in the way so many older people become invisible, not neglected exactly, but unseen. But in the spring of 1986, something shifted. A chance encounter, a forgotten memory, and a hurting teenager converged to remind Martin of a truth he'd buried. Purpose doesn't have an expiration date. Before we continue with this story, let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Never Too Late. Every week we share stories that remind you, age is just a number. This is a story about second chances, about how the wisdom earned through decades of living can become the greatest gift we offer the world. It's about discovering that sometimes finding your purpose means remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. Martin Hayes had never planned to become invisible. In 1956, at 23 hours, he'd been vibrant, restless, full of plans that seemed to glow in the dark. He'd met Eleanor at a church dance, married her 6 months later, and believed with absolute certainty that life was a story he could write himself. He worked at the post office because it was stable, but his real passion was basketball. Not playing. His knees had given out in high school, but coaching. He'd volunteered at the YMCA, spending evenings teaching kids fundamentals, chest passes, pivot footwork, the architecture of teamwork. Eleanor used to tease him about it. "You love those kids more than you love coming home," she'd say, but her eyes were warm. She understood. Martin had a gift for seeing potential in people who couldn't see it in themselves. Then came 1971. Eleanor's cancer arrived like a thief, swift and merciless. Within 8 months, she was gone. And Martin was left with their 13-year-old daughter, Patricia, and a grief so complete, it felt like drowning. He stopped coaching, stopped everything that wasn't strictly necessary. Survival became his only ambition. Patricia grew up, as children do, with or without their parents. Full presence. She married a nice man from Milwaukee, had 2 children, and visited on holidays with the kind of dutiful affection that comes from loving someone you don't quite know anymore. Martin understood. He'd become a shadow of himself, reliable, present, but somehow absent. By 1986, retirement had settled over him like snow. He was 63 too, and his life had shrunk to routines. He woke at 6, even though he no longer had to, made instant coffee in the same chipped mug he'd used for 20 years, read the Tribune front to back, working the crossword until his hand cramped. Sometimes he'd walk down to Lou's Diner for lunch, a patty melt, no onions, coffee black, and exchange pleasantries with Doris, the waitress who'd worked there longer than anyone could remember. "How are you doing today, Martin?" "Can't complain." It was always the same, "can't complain," as if contentment and resignation were the same thing. His apartment was neat, impersonal. Photographs of Patricia and the grandchildren sat on the mantel, but Martin rarely looked at them. They reminded him of time passing, of a life that had happened to him rather than one he'd actively lived. The furniture was from the 70s, a brown corduroy sofa, a TV with wood paneling, curtains Eleanor had chosen that he'd never thought to replace. The place smelled faintly of coffee and old newsprint. On Tuesdays, he'd walk to the library and check out detective novels he'd forget by the weekend. On Thursdays, he'd get groceries, the same items, the same brands, arranged in the same order on his counter. His neighbors nodded politely when they passed in the hallway, but no one stopped to talk. Martin had become the kind of old man people looked through rather than at. He told himself this was fine. This was what aging meant. You did your time, raised your family, worked your job, and then you stepped back to let the world belong to someone else. He'd earned his rest. But rest, Martin was beginning to realize, felt a lot like disappearing. Some mornings, he'd stand at his window watching the neighborhood wake up. Kids running to catch the school bus, young mothers pushing strollers, men in suits hurrying toward the L station with briefcases and purpose. Martin would press his palm against the cool glass and feel the weight of his own irrelevance. When had he stopped mattering? When had he stopped wanting to matter? There were moments, brief, startling moments, when the old Martin would surface. He'd see a kid shooting hoops in a driveway and feel his fingers twitch, wanting to correct the form. Or he'd overhear someone at the diner struggling with a problem, and advice would form on his tongue, unspoken. But then the moment would pass, and he'd retreat back into his smallness, convinced that his insights belonged to a version of himself that no longer existed. His only real companion was a tabby cat named Eleanor, a name he'd chosen without irony, needing something in the apartment that responded when called. The cat was indifferent to him, which felt appropriate. Martin would sit in his armchair while the evening news droned on. Eleanor curled at the other end of the sofa, and he'd wonder if this was all that remained. This quiet, this stillness, this waiting for nothing in particular. Patricia called every Sunday at 3. The conversations followed a script. "How are you, Dad?" "Fine, fine, keeping busy." "The kids say hi. Tell them hi back. You should come visit. Maybe soon." They both knew he wouldn't. It wasn't that Martin was depressed, exactly. He functioned. He paid his bills, kept himself clean, ate regular meals. But there was a flatness to his days, a monochrome quality that made one week indistinguishable from the next. He'd become an expert at killing time, which felt like a terrible thing to be good at. Sometimes, late at night when sleep wouldn't come, Martin would lie in bed and try to remember the last time he'd felt truly needed. Not wanted, not tolerated, but necessary. The answer always came back to those evenings at the YMCA, decades ago, when he'd watch a struggling kid finally make a shot they'd been practicing for weeks, and he'd see their whole face transform. That feeling of being the catalyst for someone else's breakthrough. He couldn't remember the last time he'd experienced it. March of 1986 was unusually cold. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through the streets with a vengeance, and Martin stopped taking his afternoon walks. Instead, he'd pace his apartment, 6 steps to the window, turn, 6 steps back. Eleanor the cat would watch him with inscrutable eyes. One Wednesday afternoon, restless and inexplicably agitated, Martin did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He opened the closet in what used to be Patricia's bedroom and pulled out a cardboard box from the back corner. Inside were relics, coaching notebooks filled with plays he'd diagrammed, photographs of teams he'd mentored, a whistle on a frayed lanyard, certificates of appreciation from the Y. He sat on the floor, his knees protesting, and paged through a notebook from 1968. His handwriting was confident, energetic. Notes about a kid named Terrence who couldn't dribble with his left hand. Strategies for building confidence in a shy player named David. A quote he'd copied from someone. A coach's job isn't to create champions. It's to help people discover they're capable of more than they believed. Martin closed the notebook slowly. His throat felt tight. Who was that man who wrote those words? Where had he gone? The next morning, Martin woke with a strange urgency. He couldn't name it, couldn't explain it, but it pulled at him like a hook behind his sternum. He abandoned his crossword halfway through, left his coffee to grow cold, and found himself pulling on his coat and hat almost without deciding to. He walked, not his usual route, but south, toward the old neighborhood, toward the gymnasium where he'd first learned to love basketball, where he'd later taught others to love it too. He hadn't been there in years, maybe decades. He wasn't sure why he was going now. The building looked older, shabbier. The brick was weathered. Graffiti tagged the lower walls, but it was unmistakably the same place. Through the high windows, Martin could hear the echo of a bouncing ball, the squeak of shoes, voices calling out. He stood outside for a long time, hands in his pockets, breath clouding in the cold air. Then he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The smell hit him first, that specific combination of sweat, rubber, and wood polish that belongs only to old gymnasiums. It was a scent that carried memory in its molecules. Martin's heart began to beat faster. Inside, the space was exactly as he remembered and completely different. The same high ceiling, the same faded championship banners from the 1950s and 60s, the same wooden backboards. But everything looked smaller now, worn down by time and budget cuts. The paint was peeling in places. The scoreboard was dark. Still, the floor gleamed under the lights, and that counted for something. A dozen teenagers were running drills, or trying to. They moved with the chaotic energy of kids who hadn't yet learned discipline, their potential visible but unrefined. A young coach stood at mid-court, whistle around his neck, calling out instructions that most of them ignored. Martin moved to the bleachers and sat, his coat still on. He didn't know why he was staying. He had no reason to be here. Then he saw Marcus. The boy was at the far end of the court, deliberately separate from the others. He was tall but hadn't grown into his height yet, all limbs and angles, moving with the self-consciousness of someone who believed he was being watched and judged at all times. His jersey hung loose. His sneakers looked new, probably a gift from parents trying to encourage him. The coach called for layup lines. The kids formed 2 rows, and Marcus ended up near the back. One by one, they took their turns. Some smooth, some clumsy, but all of them unself-conscious in the way young people could be. When Marcus's turn came, Martin found himself leaning forward. The boy dribbled twice, approached the basket, and shot. The ball hit the rim, bounced hard, and careened off toward the bleachers. A few kids groaned. One laughed. Marcus's face flushed crimson. He retrieved the ball with his head down and passed it to the next person in line. Martin's chest constricted. He knew that shame, remembered it with photographic clarity. He'd been 14 in this exact gymnasium, and a coach had told him he was wasting everyone's time, that he should quit and make room for someone with actual talent. Martin had believed him, had carried that voice for decades. Now, watching Marcus shrink into himself, Martin felt something he hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not at the boy, but at the world's casual cruelty, at all the ways people are told they're not enough. The coach blew his whistle. "All right, Scrimmage? Marcus, you're out. Take a water break. Marcus didn't protest. He walked to the bench, sat alone, and stared at his hands. He wasn't crying, but his jaw was clenched, and his breathing was too deliberate. Martin recognized the signs of someone fighting to hold themselves together. The scrimmage started, loud and unruly. Martin stood. He wasn't aware of making a decision. His legs simply carried him across the gym floor toward the bench where Marcus sat. "Hey," Martin said, his voice rusty from disuse. Marcus looked up, startled. "Hi, you're working too hard." The boy blinked. "What?" "On the layup. You're thinking too much." Tensing up, Martin gestured toward the basket. "Your body knows what to do. You just have to stop telling it not to trust itself." Marcus stared at him, confused and wary. "Who are you?" "Someone who made that exact same mistake for years." Martin smiled slightly. "Can I show you something?" The boy hesitated, then shrugged. "I guess." They walked to an empty basket at the side of the gym. Martin picked up a basketball, feeling its familiar weight and texture. How long had it been? His hands remembered before his mind did. "Watch," Martin said. He dribbled once, stepped toward the basket, and laid the ball gently against the backboard. It dropped through the net with a soft whisper. His knees ached, but the movement was still there, muscle memory from half a century ago. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. "Now you," Martin said, passing him the ball. "But don't think about the basket. Think about the rhythm. Dribble, step, release, like a dance. You're not fighting the ball, you're guiding it." Marcus tried. The ball clanged off the rim. "Again," Martin said. "Softer hands. Trust the backboard to do the work." Marcus tried again and again. On the fifth attempt, the ball kissed the backboard and fell through the net. The boy's face transformed, surprise, then a tentative smile. "There it is," Martin said quietly. "See? You knew how all along." For the next 20 minutes, they worked together. Martin offered small corrections. "Bend your knees more. Follow through with your wrist. Look at the square on the backboard, not the rim." And Marcus, skeptical at first, began to trust. His shoulders relaxed, his movements smoothed. The young coach appeared at Martin's elbow. "Excuse me, sir. This is a closed practice." Martin turned. "Sorry, I used to coach here, years ago. Just offering the kid a few pointers." The coach's expression was polite but firm. "I appreciate that, but we have protocols, insurance, liability. I'm sure you understand." Martin nodded slowly. "Of course." He started to walk away, then stopped, turned back. That boy has something. He just needs someone to believe he does. The coach glanced at Marcus, then back at Martin. "Thanks for the input." It was a dismissal. Martin recognized it because he'd become an expert at recognizing dismissals. He was old, obsolete in the way. He walked toward the exit, his moment of purpose evaporating as quickly as it had arrived. "Wait." Martin stopped. Marcus had followed him. "That thing you said about trusting yourself, did it work for you?" Martin looked at the boy, really looked at him. He saw the hunger there, the need to be seen and valued. He saw the fear of being disappointing. He saw himself. "No," Martin said honestly. "I stopped trusting myself a long time ago, and I've regretted it ever since." The boy processed this. "Then why'd you help me?" Martin felt something crack wider inside his chest. "Because maybe it's not too late for you to learn what I didn't." They stood there, an old man and a young boy, connected by something wordless and profound. Then the coach called Marcus back, and the moment ended. Martin walked out of the gymnasium into the cold March afternoon. His hands were shaking, not from cold or age, but from something else entirely. He felt awake, present, as if he'd been sleepwalking for 15 years and had suddenly jolted conscious. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. He kept seeing Marcus's face, that flush of shame when he missed, that glimmer of hope when he succeeded. He kept hearing his own voice. Because maybe it's not too late for you. Was it too late for Martin? The question lodged itself in his chest like a splinter. At 3 a.m, he got up, made coffee, and sat at his kitchen table with the old coaching notebook spread in front of him. He read through his notes, his strategies, his observations about dozens of kids whose names he'd forgotten. The handwriting belonged to someone confident, someone who believed he had something to offer. When had he stopped believing that? Eleanor's death, certainly. But even before that, there had been a gradual erosion, little dismissals, aging out of relevance, the world moving on while he stood still. He'd accepted his irrelevance as inevitable, even appropriate. Old people stepped aside. That was the natural order. But what if it wasn't? Martin thought about Marcus, isolated on that bench. How many other kids were sitting alone, convinced they didn't belong? How many had potential that no one was taking time to cultivate? The young coach was doing his best, but he was overwhelmed, spread thin, working with limited resources. What if Martin could help? The thought was absurd. He was 63. He had no formal credentials, no official capacity. He was just a retired postal worker with ancient memories of coaching. But the thought wouldn't leave him. At dawn, Martin called the community center that ran the gym. He asked about volunteer opportunities. The woman on the phone was friendly, but non-committal. "We always need help. Come by and fill out an application." He did. That afternoon, still operating on zero sleep and pure adrenaline, Martin filled out paperwork, got a background check started, and met with the program director, a tired-looking woman named Helen who managed youth programs with half the budget she needed. "We can't pay you," Helen said. "This would be strictly volunteer." "I don't need pay." "What's your experience?" Martin told her. About the YMCA, about the years he'd spent coaching, about the gap since then. Helen studied him. Why now? Why come back after all this time? Martin thought about Marcus, about the gymnasium, about the person he used to be. "Because I forgot I could still matter," he said quietly. "And I don't want to forget again." Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "We have a junior league starting in April. Could use another assistant coach. You interested?" Martin's heart hammered. Yes. Then welcome back, Coach Hayes." The first practice was terrifying. Martin arrived 30 minutes early, his stomach churning. What was he thinking? He was 63. These kids didn't want some old man telling them what to do. They'd dismiss him, ignore him, laugh at him. He'd make a fool of himself. He almost left, almost got back in his car and drove home to the safety of his crossword puzzles and his quiet, meaningless routine. Then Marcus walked in. The boy saw him and stopped. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus smiled, tentative but real. And that was enough. Martin stayed. The team was a ragtag collection of misfits, 8 boys and 3 girls, ages 14 to 17, most of them from the neighborhood. Some were there because they loved basketball. Others were there because it beat going home. The head coach was a man named Robert Chen, the same young coach from before, and he greeted Martin with polite skepticism. "We'll try this," Robert said. "But the kids respond better to energy. No offense, but they might not connect with someone your age." Martin nodded. "I understand." That first practice, he mostly watched. He learned names, observed dynamics, saw who led, who followed, who retreated. Marcus was still on the periphery, still hesitant, but he kept glancing at Martin as if checking whether he was real. At the end of practice, Martin approached Robert. "That play you ran, the pick and roll, it's not working because the timing's off. Your point guard sets the screen too early." Robert frowned. "I'll work on it." The next practice, Martin spoke up more. He offered small corrections, tips on footwork and positioning. Some kids listened, most didn't. But slowly, gradually, they began to notice that when they followed his suggestions, things worked better. Their passes connected. Their shots found rhythm. Marcus blossomed under Martin's attention, not overnight. This wasn't a fairy tale, but incrementally. His confidence grew in small steps. He made a good pass and stood a little straighter. He successfully defended an opponent and allowed himself a smile. Martin was there for all of it, offering quiet encouragement, correcting without criticism. "You're doing good work with him," Robert said one evening after practice. His skepticism had softened into respect. With all of them, actually. Martin felt something warm in his chest. "They're good kids. They are, and they listen to you. Even the troublemakers," Martin had noticed. Even the boys who challenged Robert's authority would pause when Martin spoke. There was something about his calm presence, his lack of ego, his genuine interest in their success that disarmed their defenses. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He was just there to help. Word spread. Other parents started asking if Martin could work with their kids. The community center asked him to take on additional hours. By May, Martin was coaching 3 times a week and mentoring several kids one-on-one. His life transformed. He woke early, not out of habit, but out of anticipation. He'd plan drills, study new strategies, think about each kid's specific needs. His apartment, once a tomb of silence, became a workspace. Notebooks covered his kitchen table. His phone rang with calls from parents thanking him. His calendar filled with practices, games, mentoring sessions. Patricia noticed during their Sunday call. "You sound different, Dad." "Do I?" "Happier, more alive." "What's going on?" He told her. About the gymnasium, about Marcus, about coaching. As he spoke, he heard the animation in his own voice, a quality that had been missing for years. "Dad, that's wonderful," Patricia said, and he could hear her smiling. "I'm so proud of you." Those words, "I'm proud of you," landed like a gift. When had anyone last said that to him? But not everything was easy. Martin's body reminded him constantly that he was 63, not 30. His knees ached after long practices. He needed reading glasses to see his notes. He moved slower than he used to, got tired more easily. Sometimes he'd catch kids exchanging glances when he struggled to demonstrate a drill, and he'd feel the sting of his limitations. One afternoon, frustrated after missing an easy demonstration shot, Martin snapped at a boy who was joking around. The kid looked hurt, and Martin immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry," Martin said. "That wasn't fair." The boy shrugged, but the moment sat heavy. Martin realized he was trying too hard, pushing himself to be someone he no longer was. He couldn't move like a young man, couldn't keep up physically, and he needed to accept that. That night, he sat with Robert after practice. "I'm slowing you down," Martin said. "Maybe I should step back." Robert looked at him, surprised. "Are you kidding?" "Martin, you're the best thing that's happened to this program. The kids trust you in a way they don't trust me. But I can't demonstrate like I used to." "So what? That's not why they listen to you." Robert leaned forward. "You listen to them first. You see them. Do you know how rare that is? Most adults look at these kids and see problems or potential gang members or disappointments. You look at them and see people worth investing in." Martin absorbed this. "I just remember what it felt like, being written off. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're changing lives here." The season culminated in a tournament in June. Martin's team wasn't expected to do well. They were the underdogs, the scrappy kids from the underfunded program, but they played with heart. They played as a team, and Marcus, who'd started the season barely able to make a layup, scored 18 points in their semifinal game. They didn't win the championship, lost in the finals by 7 points. But when the buzzer sounded, Martin's kids didn't look defeated. They looked proud. They'd given everything, and that was enough. In the parking lot afterward, Marcus found Martin. "Thank you," the boy said, his voice thick with emotion, "for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Martin hugged him. "You did the work. I just reminded you that you could." Later, driving home, Martin wept. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming fullness of being needed again, of mattering, of using his decades of experience not as a burden, but as a gift. The months that followed brought more changes. Helen, The program director offered Martin a permanent position as the head of youth mentoring. Still volunteer, but with real responsibility. He accepted. The local paper ran a small article about the retired postal worker giving back. Several other community centers called, wanting to replicate the model, but the most profound change was internal. Martin stopped seeing age as a limitation and started seeing it as authority earned through experience. His gray hair wasn't a sign of irrelevance, but evidence of survival, of wisdom accumulated through decades of living. The kids didn't dismiss his age. They respected it because he wore it with confidence rather than apology. He reconnected with Patricia in meaningful ways. She visited more often, brought the grandchildren to watch practices. His granddaughter asked if he'd teach her to shoot. Standing on the court with her, guiding her hands, Martin felt the circle complete itself. One evening in October, after a particularly good practice, Robert pulled him aside. "I've been offered a job at a school across town. Better pay, better resources. I'm going to take it." Martin's heart sank. "Congratulations. You deserve it. The center's looking for a new head coach. I recommended you." Martin stared. "Robert, I'm 63. They'll want someone younger. They want someone the kids trust. Someone who understands what it means to build people up, not just win games." Robert smiled. "Helen's already on board. The job's yours if you want it." Martin felt tears prick his eyes. "I want it." He became head coach that November. His first act was to implement a mentorship program where older players worked with younger ones, creating a culture of mutual support. His second was to expand the program to include girls' teams, which had been overlooked. His third was to establish a rule: no one sat alone. If someone was on the bench, someone else sat with them. The gymnasium became a second home. On the walls, Martin hung photos of every team, every kid. He wanted them to see themselves reflected back, to know they were part of something larger. He wrote letters of recommendation for college applications, attended kids' family events, showed up at hospitals when they were sick, became, for many of them, the stable adult presence they needed. Marcus graduated high school with a basketball scholarship to a small college downstate. At his graduation party, he gave a speech thanking his family, his teachers, and Coach Hayes, who taught me that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. Martin sat in the audience, surrounded by dozens of kids he'd coached, and realized something extraordinary. His best years hadn't been in his youth. They were happening now. Right now, at 64, with aching knees and reading glasses and a life that finally, beautifully mattered. He'd thought purpose was something you lost as you aged. But he'd been wrong. Purpose wasn't lost. It was transformed, deepened, made richer by all the years of living that came before. The gymnasium lights flickered, they always did. The smell of sweat and rubber and hope filled the air. A new season was starting. New kids would walk through those doors, unsure of themselves, needing someone to believe in them. Martin Hayes would be there, not despite his age, but because of it, because he'd learned what only time could teach, that wisdom is earned through living, that purpose can be rediscovered, and that the best years of your life might just be the ones you thought you'd missed. Martin Hayes is 73 now. He still coaches at that same gymnasium on Chicago's South Side, though he moves slower, takes more breaks, and has finally accepted help carrying the equipment bags. His hair is white, his face is lined with years, but his eyes, those still shine with purpose. The walls of the gym hold hundreds of photographs, hundreds of kids who found something they didn't know they'd lost, belief in themselves. Many of them return to visit. They bring their own children. They tell Martin stories about how that one season, that one conversation, that one moment of encouragement changed the trajectory of their lives. Marcus is 32 now. He's a teacher, coaching basketball at his own school. He calls Martin every few months. "Just checking in on my coach," he'll say. They'll talk about strategies, about difficult kids, about the small miracles that happen when you refuse to give up on people. Martin's apartment is different too. The walls hold plaques and photos. The phone rings regularly. His calendar is full. He's no longer invisible. He's essential. But here's what matters most. Martin didn't become a different person. He became who he always was, but had forgotten. The part of himself that cared, that saw potential in others, that believed effort and attention could change lives. That part never died. It just went dormant, waiting for a reason to wake up. We think purpose is something we find when we're young, when we're building careers and raising families and proving ourselves to the world. We think that after 60, after 70, we're supposed to step back, fade out, make room for the next generation. But Martin's story reminds us of a different truth. Purpose doesn't diminish with age. It evolves. The wisdom we accumulate through decades of living, the failures we've survived, the heartbreaks we've endured, the patience we've learned, that wisdom becomes our greatest offering. We have something young people can't have, no matter how talented or ambitious. We have the authority of experience. We've already faced the fears they're facing now. We know how to survive them. Your purpose isn't behind you. It's waiting to be rediscovered. Maybe it's in a gymnasium. Maybe it's in a community garden, a literacy program, a mentorship role. Maybe it's in being the person who listens when everyone else is too busy. Maybe it's in using the hard-won knowledge you carry to light the way for someone still stumbling in the dark. Martin thought his best years were gone. He was wrong. So are you, if you think the same. The question isn't whether you have something to offer. The question is, are you brave enough to offer it? If this story moved you, tell us in the comments. What would you change if you had a second chance? What's the dream you buried that's still worth digging up? Don't forget to subscribe to Never Too Late for more stories that remind us. The next chapter of your life can be the most powerful one yet. Because Martin Hayes learned what we all need to remember. It's never too late, not to matter, not to contribute, not to find your purpose, not ever.